name's Jeremy, and I make things. So what we're working on in this series is a Chesapeake Lightcraft Teardrop Camper, or CLC Teardrop Camper. And we have done a couple of unboxing videos, took you through assembling the trailer before we got some of the pieces. But today, this video is the first video where we're actually going to start putting things together. And what you see behind me are the stations for the mold. So the mold is this piece that comes and holds the shape of the camper. So it acts as a framework for the camper shape to sit into. So the plywood that we have back here stacked up is going to sit down into that mold. You'll see this whole process. But what we're going to do today is we're actually going to put the mold together. So this is very exciting. This is the first assembly that we're doing, and I'm really excited to get to it. So I'm glad you're here with me, and I'm glad you're watching. So thanks for being here. Okay, so we're going to get started putting these together, but I wanted to give you the basic idea to start with. So it's a combination of this piece, which is called a butt block, and pieces like this, which are the puzzle joints. So the puzzle joints fit together like a puzzle, and then the butt block sits over top of it and holds the two pieces together along with some glue and some screws. So that's the fundamental concept, and what I've got is I've got a table set up here that we're going to zoom in on, and I'll do one in detail so you can see exactly how that works, and then we'll speed up the process for all the other ones because it's basically the same thing over and over again until all the frames are put together, and then we will put the whole mold together and you'll see how that works. Now you may ask yourself, why the complexity? Why do these puzzle joints? Why use the butt blocks? Why not just have one big long piece? And the answer is shipping. So the cost of actually shipping these kits to individuals is based off of the size and the shape of what actually has to get shipped. So if these were done as full pieces, right, you've got this giant space here that you'd have to have a container for. That's way more expensive than creating two pieces like this that can be shipped in a flat pack, and then just a mechanism for you to bond them together to create something that's a two-dimensional, much larger shape that then sets together into a three-dimensional, significantly larger shape. So it's really innovative and clever on CLC's part, how they took something that would be very difficult to probably figure out, very difficult to ship and to deal with, and to keep cost effective, and turn it into something that can be completely flat packed and shipped relatively inexpensively comparatively. So it's, I think, a very clever idea. All right, so let's get to it. Okay, so we're going to start with station 3. So you can see there's a 3 on here. And we've got two of the butt blocks. We've got a rubber mallet to kind of help push things through. And then we've got some inexpensive wood glue and some drywall screws, which we did not have before because I didn't realize they needed 1-inch drywall screws, and all I have are larger. So if you're looking at your instructions and it's saying something like, oh, just use, you know, a 1-inch drywall screw, the answer is yes, but realistically, most people don't have 1-inch drywall screws because they're smaller than what you would normally use if you went out and bought drywall screws. Most average drywall screws are going to be 1.5 inches, or 1 5/8 inches or something like that. 1 inch is really small, but it's fine. They had them, tiny little guys, and so we're going to use these with the rest of this. Okay, so let's get started. So we're going to move some of that out of the way, and what we want to do is we want to make sure that our faces are the same side. I don't know 100% if it matters for this, but I think it does. But I believe all the numbers should end up on the same side. The other side has no numbers, so I think that is consistent. And so what we're going to do is we're going to put some glue on the outside edge, and then we're going to tap these together. So let's do some gluing. Okay, that's good. And we're going to put these here. Okay, so that's all about even, which is great. I've got glue all over the table, but it's just regular wood glue, so it'll clean up with just water. And now we're going to take the butt block, and the butt block should be positioned like this. So it's getting positioned across the joint like that. So it should be aligned relatively to this, this surface. So this line and this line should be about the same, about like that. So we're going to put glue on this side, and we're going to glue it down. Great. And then the last step is to put a couple of screws in there. I'm sorry, I was wrong on the orientation. No, that's not. No, I was right on the orientation. One of the pictures they show has it going like this, but it's too long to go that way. So it's got to be this orientation here. So we're just going to put 4 screws in. Okay, and that's the finished joint right there. So now we're going to do this, the other thing on the other end. But before we do that, I'm going to clean up just a little bit of this glue. It's just water. Water in a spray bottle. Alright, so now we're going to take the other side, and I'm going to take a sawhorse and sort of catch this edge. Part of 3. So again, make the numbers fit each other. Let's do a test fit real quick. Not bad. It's still a little tight. Maybe I can take one of my files and just sort of just to see if that'll help make it fit a little smidge better. Not bad. Alright, it's not great. Not a perfect fit, but it's fine. Alright, so same thing, we'll put the glue on and then tap this into place. Again, this is just the form, so we don't care that it looks a little beat up on the outside. My rubber mallet's a little old, and so it leaves a mess on things. I really need to get a better one that doesn't leave a lot of schmutz. And now we're going to do the same thing with the block. Put the glue on and screw it down. Anyway, this is the finished frame now. You can see, and it's all together. You can also see how much volume this whole thing would take up if we were doing it differently. If they were sending the whole thing through. So this is station 3. Oops. This is station 3, and you can see it's got both of the butt blocks on here, right? And then the puzzle joint is together, right, on both ends. And then the whole thing, you know, is pretty tall. So I'm 6 foot, and it's a few inches above me. So that's the width of the mold, essentially, because this will sit like that, and you'll see that when we get through them. So anyway, all of them have the same sort of construction mechanism. They all work basically the same. You put the puzzle joint together, you use the butt block to hold it together, add extra stability, and some glue to keep it all tight. So that is it. All right, so what we're going to do now is you'll see me go through all the other frames, but rather than narrating it, we'll just do it. We'll do it more quickly. Time lapse. Time lapse is our friend. All right, on to it. So now that the frames have been assembled and put together, what I want to do now is actually build the mold. So the instructions say to start with the longitudinal frames, which are these two big frames that are in the video right now. And they say to use a friend and this, that, and the next thing. You know, again, I'm trying not to bother other people while I'm doing this. So what I did was I just attached a clamp on the end of those and sort of set them up against the table. And so the clamp kept them from falling to the left or the right. And the table acted as sort of a stabilizer. And that worked great. It didn't really matter what height the table was. The clamp just sort of sat on the table and held the frame in place. So the clamp is actually clamped to the longitudinal frame, but it just sits flat on the table and holds everything right there, which acted perfect. It was an extra set of hands for me, which was great. Then next in the instructions, they say to start with station 3, and that's what I have in my hands here. And I'm looking at it and thinking to myself, okay, this sounds good. I'm going to go work on this. But their numbering, I think, is off a little bit, because when I actually match station 3 up to the longitudinal frames, it's in this sort of weird diagonal position, and that's not what they show in the book. And it just isn't a very easy frame to deal with. And so I tried to make it work and kind of played around with it. But ultimately, I ended up deciding that this wasn't the right way to go. Here you actually see me looking in the book to make sure that I read it right, because I thought it said 3, and I'm counting them out with my hands going, okay, well, this is 1, 2, this is 3 down here in this weird diagonal position. That doesn't seem like what I want to do here. I recount it myself. I'm going back and forth and looking at it, and ultimately I'm sort of scratching my head and going, okay, I don't get this. So I finally decide that this is not the way that I want to go after sort of trying it and seeing if I could make it fit. Because here I'm putting 3 into the 4 position and deciding that that's probably not my best plan. Because, again, I look at the pictures, and the pictures show 3 very specifically being in the middle, and it's not. That's not the right one. So
ultimately, I end up changing things up. It takes me a while to figure out that 3 is not in 4 and whatnot. So at this point, I look at the book and I realize that I put frame 3 into frame 4 slot, and realize I need to remove it from the 4 slot and put it into the 3 slot. And again, it's just the pictures in the book say, at least the way I was reading it, maybe I read it wrong, but it looked like the pictures were showing a frame going into slot. It looked like it was showing frame 4, but calling it frame 3. So I pull it out of the 4th slot and start positioning it into the 3rd slot. And once I have it in position in the 3rd slot, then I start adding frame 4 and 5. What I did realize after this, putting this in, is this was a very difficult frame to put in place compared to frames 4 or 5. So in retrospect, I probably would have started with frame 4 instead of frame 3, like the book seemed to indicate. Frame 4 is the one that goes right below this one, and it's just a lot easier to put in place. It's a bigger frame, so it kind of holds things more in a more stable fashion, and it positioned the longitudinal frames a little bit more cleanly. Frame 3 was just a more awkward frame to put in. So, but I do get frame 3 in. It does hold the longitudinal frames in place like it should, and it's not a big deal. So. Then I go ahead and grab frame 4 and pull it out of the pile. Like I said, it's a bigger frame. It's just bulkier. A 4 and 5 are probably the largest frames out of the whole thing. And frame 4 goes in place the same way as 3 did. You're matching up the slots on both so that they sit flush. Each slot, it's cut about halfway through both frames. So when they slot together, they make a flush space, or they make a flush surface, which is what you need when you're putting the plywood in place, which you'll see in a little bit. So they slot together pretty easily. Again, you'll see me use the rubber mallet here and there to be able to get the pieces in place. Once you have one frame in, you don't need those clamps anymore. So I removed those because they were actually canting the longitudinal frames and making it a little bit more difficult to seat in properly. But once I removed those clamps, then everything could be completely parallel and not sliding at all. And only needed a little tap from the wooden mallet to get them to sit. So we finish up frame 4. So now we have 3 and 4 in place, and all of that looks good. And so we move to frame 5. So now I'm picking up frame 5 and we're adding that in. And it's the same process. Again, you match the slots up and you try and keep everything as parallel and perpendicular as possible. And generally everything fit together really well as long as the positioning was right. Didn't need a lot of massaging at all. Once you've got 3, 4, and 5 in, everything's really kind of established, and the rest of the frames go pretty easily. So here I'm putting in frame 6, and then there's another one after that. That's frame 7. These are much smaller frames. There was no assembly for these. They were already pre-cut and ready to go, unlike the larger frames like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the 2 longitudinal frames, which needed to be assembled. 6 and 7 are just stabilizers, and they just needed a little bit more massaging because they were a little bit of a tighter fit for whatever reason. Once 6 gets in place, and one of the things that I noticed is that it was sort of canting from side to side. So as I tapped one side, the other side would lift up, and as I tapped the other side would lift up, and it kind of toggled back and forth. So I realized if I put pressure underneath the longitudinal frame, it helped it from popping the one side or the other. So here you're seeing me put in frame 7. One thing to note about frame 7, and the instructions note this as well, is that frame 7 isn't in some of the images that they have. It was a later frame that was added for additional stability. And that honestly didn't mess me up at all. It was very clear. I thought there were other things in their images that were more confusing than frame 7 not being there. Like the use frame 3, but we actually mean frame 4 type thing. So this is frame 2. And again, this one didn't require really any assembly. It's just a small stabilizer between 3 and 1. And then after this is going to be frame 1. Frame 1 is kind of different than all the other frames. It comes around the top like a horseshoe, and actually merges or mounts to the 2 longitudinal frames like the other ones, but it actually mounts to frame 3 as well, which you'll see. Now, before we add frame 1, though, we're adding the side stabilizers. And what they do is they hold the top part of frames 3, 4, and 5 together. Now, this is important to do before frame 1 because you need frame 3 in a very specific position. And this horizontal stabilizer, this top stabilizer, really gets the orientation of frame 3, the top of frame 3, frame 4, and frame 5 to be in a very specific alignment, the specific alignment that you need. And what that does is it also makes it the correct orientation for frame 3 to match up with frame 1. So I put this on both the port and starboard side, or the driver's side and the passenger side. And that takes us to the last frame, which is frame 1. So frame 1 is going to sit down on top of the longitudinal frames, and it's going to sit down on top of frame 3. So it kind of matches up against slots that are on all of those, the longitudinal frames and frame 3. And so you're just matching up these sort of finger joints and getting them positioned. So it's not a crisscross slot like the other ones. And after we're done with this, then we start adding in drywall screws in the joints of all of these to fix the position so that it doesn't wander. But what really helps here is those horizontal stabilizers that we added, holding 3, 4, and 5 together, so that when you add on frame 1, it's matched up perfectly against the teeth on the longitudinal frames as well as frame 3, and has everything in a specific position and orientation. Then the last step in all of this, and this goes for pretty much all the connections, every joint between a frame and between frames gets reinforced with a small drywall screw that joins the two pieces. So here we're putting in the very first two, which are between frame 1 and frame 3 to hold those in place. And then we do screws between 1 and the longitudinal frames. And then I put in screws on every crisscross. So where frame 3 and the longitudinal frame meet, and frame 2 and the longitudinal frame meet, and frame 4 and the longitudinal frame meet, and frame 3 and the horizontal stabilizer meet, and frame 4 and the horizontal stabilizer, and frame 5 and the horizontal stabilizer. So every junction that you see here gets reinforced with a drywall screw. And what that does is it just helps hold the orientation of all of these pieces and keep things flush as you're moving the frame around, or rocking this from one side to the other, or flipping it on its edge or whatnot.
Okay, so we have built the mold. So it was a pretty long process for putting this together, but pretty straightforward. A couple of things I learned along the way is that some of the butt blocks have to go one orientation, some of the others. But when you put the block across the fingers, if you screw into each of the fingers on all the sides, it ends up being about 5 screws. And that's going to give you the maximum stability. So I started off doing one thing and then kind of shifted into doing another. I think frame 3 was the only one that the block didn't orient with the joint like this. It had to orient sideways because there wasn't enough room, but 3 was what I started with. The other thing is the instruction booklet says when you put the longitudinal frames in, put frame 3 in first. I would say put frame 4 in first. Frame 4 or frame 5, but probably frame 4 is your best bet. That'll get everything in place. Frame 3 is a little bit tricky and it was a little challenging, but frame 4 seems to be the right one. So I think they just have the number wrong, or they changed the numbering system over time when they added additional braces. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching this. I hope you enjoy this content. Again, if you like what you're seeing, please hit the like button. Please subscribe if you want to see more of this content. This is a part of a fairly long series that we're going to do, building this Chesapeake Lightcraft trailer, teardrop camper. But there will be so much more coming with this channel. I made tons of stuff, and this was just the first project that I wanted to start with. So I hope you enjoy it, and if you click the notify button, we'll let you know when our next video is posted, but it's going to be about once a week or so. But again, thank you very much for watching. I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad that you're enjoying this content, and I enjoy making it for you. So thank you very much, and have a great day.